Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 302, and I'm delighted to welcome back onto the podcast. It's been far too long, Ollie Morgan. How are we doing?
Very well, Ben. Thanks very much for having me back on.
No, I appreciate you coming on, mate. It's been we've caught up along the way through messages and stayed in touch, but yeah, it's been a long time and a lot of changes since we did the last podcast. Ollie, we start these in the same place to give people an idea on you, your background, and also what you're currently doing. So, can you give us a little bit of a career rundown today?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start where I am now, I guess, very quickly. So my current role is Head of Performance Support in the Academy at Leicester. I've been here for 2.5 years. So we identify as performance support as a department. So that incorporates sports science, strength and conditioning, nutrition, performance analysis, and the performance end of psychology as well. So yeah, quite a lot of people, and most of people really that aren't football or coaching orientated, but are still player orientated. So that's where I am now. Where I've been, I was at the University of Birmingham. That's back in 2007, so a little while ago now. And I started an internship at Coventry my last year there, which was great. It was a great experience to get started in football, and that was at the first team actually. So that was under Chris Coleman the first year, and the second year I was there, that was under AD Boothroyd. So yeah, some interesting experiences there. I learned a lot. In my second year there, I was really lucky actually. There was a studentship at Coventry University that was looking into some talent identification, and that was paired with Queensland University with a guy called Robbie Wilson. So they set up an MRes, a paid for MRes, and I managed to get it, which was really lucky. So I didn't really have any fees for my master's degree, which helps when you're an intern. So I stayed on, and that was my first entry really into academy football, which was great, which gave me sort of both ends of the spectrum. I worked first team during the day, and I went down into the academy of an afternoon and of an evening to get my experience there. And we obviously tested. It was skills-based testing really, which was great. So that was sort of my first experience of, as I said, of academy football and understanding a bit more around talent ID and talent development. That finished in 2011, and after that I went to Liverpool. So I went to Liverpool's academy as an academy sports scientist, and I was mostly looking at the 15s and 16s there, which was great. And I was really lucky. I had 8 years at Liverpool, or 8 seasons. I did a few different roles there in the end, and I worked with some fantastic people. Really, really lucky, both yeah, some fantastic practitioners and some fantastic coaches. And I've got some really fond memories of working at Liverpool, still in touch with a lot of people there. I ended up working in rehab, which was a really, really enjoyable role. And that was sort of a time where these rehab fitness coach roles or rehab sports scientist roles really sort of started taking, or there was more of them around really. So that was great. So I had sort of 1 foot in the sports science camp and 1 foot in the medical and physiotherapy camp, and it helped to bring those two departments closer together really. So that was great. I really enjoyed that. I also started my prof doc at LJMU at that time as well, 2017. I think I started that. So yeah, so I was there until around about 2019, I think it was, and I went to Celtic then as the head of academy sports science, which was my first leadership in management role. I looked after sports science, S&C, nutrition and psychology there, which again was a great experience to go and work in Scotland. And that's where we had our last podcast, was 2019. So it was kind of right at the beginning of that process. And yeah, again, I've got some really fond memories of Glasgow. A really special club to be part of. Scotland looked at football slightly differently, and Glasgow, especially being the heart of football in Scotland, it's certainly a bit of a fishbowl experience. It's hard to describe unless you're actually there. But yeah, fantastic experience to be part of that rivalry, I guess. And it was really interesting. We had a bit of a blank slate, so it was very much a startup in terms of the sports science department. We inherited a couple of members of staff, but it was very much recruitment, development, and accelerated growth. So I was really lucky at Liverpool. I went in just before the EPPP. So we had 3 members of staff at the time. And when I left, I think we had around about 12, including PhDs and interns. So that was a natural development over time, over a period of sort of 8 seasons, where you go from almost skeleton staff, you describe it now, to a really fully fledged department. And that was the remit at Celtic. It was go in and, you know, create Celtic's version of that effectively. So yeah, that was great. As I said, really enjoyed it. And yeah, came down to Leicester to be their head of performance support. And that's where I am now. So yeah, a quick rundown of that really. And I'm sure I've missed some bits out in between, but that's a bit of a snapshot of where I've been in my career. Yeah.
You mentioned about the difference in when you stepped into that role at Celtic of being more of a leadership role. What was your sort of approach to transitioning into that role, and did you identify certain skills that were maybe different to what you had in what you utilized in previous roles?
Yeah, I think so. I think leadership's a funny one, isn't it? Because there's definitely a position element to leadership, but there's lots of leaders that we know that aren't necessarily in the main leadership position. So there's no reason why people can't develop leadership skills when they're going into a leadership position, or they've got their eyes on it and they're not quite there yet. So I had maybe some small experiences of what that looks like, because we had intern structures and PhD programs at Liverpool. And I guess we all know what it's like to be poorly managed at times. And I think everyone takes that into their first management and leadership role, saying, well, I'll never do that, which is certainly more easily said than done. So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you become very skilled in a certain area. And when I left Liverpool, I was in that rehab role. So I was trying to upskill myself as best as I possibly could to be the best rehabilitation sports scientist that I could be. And then a lot of those skills aren't necessarily transferable to the next role. So a difficult process to go through in some regards. I think you just got to try and be yourself and just understand the situation that you're in. When I went into the role, actually, my boss at the time was a guy called Jack Naylor. You know Jack, obviously, but you know, a fantastic sports scientist and a great guy. He bought me a book before I joined Celtic. It was called The First 90 Days, and it was a book that he got bought. Someone gave it to him before he went into a similar role. That really helped, actually. I recommend anybody reading that book before going into a management and leadership role. Just helps you to understand sort of the needs analysis and address what you need to address. So they use a STAR model. It's an acronym: startup, turnaround, accelerated growth, realignment, and sustaining success. So it's just understanding really where do you need to pitch your leadership and your management based on what's needed at the time. So at Celtic, it was a bit of a startup because we were recruiting people to join the team. So we were setting up a PhD program. We recruited a sports scientist to work with younger ages. We recruited a psychologist. And then it was like an accelerated growth, and it was how much can we push on and develop within the remits of what people were accepting in terms of development, if that makes sense, and change. So that's kind of where I pitched it, and I just tried to be myself as much as possible. And yeah, I don't know, try and learn along the way and fail fast and ask for feedback. I think that's the main one. And one of the best things since then that I've had, actually, Ben, is a mentorship scheme. So if you can find either an official mentor or an unofficial mentor that can maybe help come and just see you work on a daily basis, see how you deliver, see what you're like with people, just to sort of, you know, have that candid approach, they can really give you some honest feedback. So that's something that's really helped later on. And I guess I wish I had a bit earlier on in my leadership career. But I was helped out massively by Jack Naylor. He was a great support. And I was really lucky at Celtic because there were some terrific people there that didn't really need a lot of managing, really. So that massively helped. And it just allowed me to find my feet. And yeah, one of the guys I used to work with at Celtic, we've now recruited to come and work at Leicester. So yeah, it was really lucky there that I had those people at the time, I guess.
I know you said before about in terms of the skills you need in a leadership position. They can be developed, they can be learned through experiences, and like you said about failing fast and picking that up. Do you feel like that's the natural progression for every coach then? Do you feel like everyone could end up in that position? Obviously, people are going to be, they're going to have different approaches, going to have different personalities, different experiences. But do you feel like everyone could potentially get to that? Or you don't need to name names, but is there experiences of people where you feel like, no, actually, you probably need to be in a similar sort of role to what you're in and just develop and be good and be the best possible person you can be in that role?
Interesting question. I think there's some schools of thought that maybe your personal characteristics may be more suited towards a certain role. I'd hate to sit here and say that people can't do a role just maybe on their personal characteristics. I think that's often just your starting position, isn't it? So if you've got a starting position and those natural tendencies that you have aren't aligned necessarily to a leadership role, it doesn't mean you can't bend when you're at work and flex and fit into the role that you need to be. It might be easier for some people more than others, perhaps. And I guess you see that with managers, don't you? There's a lot of managers out there that are assistant managers that are great number twos that are really happy just to be an assistant manager, not necessarily be the overall manager and the overall leader. So I think that's kind of where I'd stand on that one, I guess. I think roles are there's a lot more specialist roles coming about, I think now more than ever. So whether, like you said, it's that rehab role, whether it's a data scientist, I think roles are getting paid. There's a bit more of a flat structure. Well, I'd hope to say there is across the industry, and people recognise that there's, working at say 9 to 14s age group is a specialist role, and we should probably reward those people as much as someone that's working with older age groups. So we try and do that at Leicester, and we certainly try to do that at Celtic too. And I think it's really important. So I hope that is across the industry. But with these more specialist roles, I guess you've got an opportunity that you can go into that and have a long career in performance support or sports science without having to necessarily have to go into a management and leadership role. I think when I first went into sports science, there were a handful of positions, and then you very quickly became a manager, and you managed the department. So I think people can be a bit more open-minded now around where they want to go. So I know lots of rehabilitation fitness coaches and sports scientists that worked in academies that have gone to work in first team, they've gone to work abroad, they've gone to work in different sports. So I think there's more options now more than ever than people that have to go on necessarily that leadership journey and go into management. I think it is a great thing to do though. So, if anybody wants to go and do it, yeah, I'd certainly recommend it because I think you learn a lot about yourself. And there's no harm in having a go, Ben, is there? I don't think.
100%. The other thing which is interesting about your career, because I'm sure with your experiences, like you've mentioned, the coaches you've worked with, the players you've worked with, I'm sure you've had opportunities to go into a first team environment as well, but stayed in the academy development positions. And I know that has transitioned into the leadership role like you're in now. But has that always been the target for yourself, to stay within the academy structure, to work on that and not to move into that first, and I know that it'll cross over, but not to be in the first team day to day?
I guess starting off in football in a first team environment, probably had that itch scratched a little bit. Like I had that for 2 years and I kind of knew what that might look like. Obviously it's going to be different at different clubs and different at different standards. So obviously Coventry being in the Championship at the time, I'm sure it looks very different at a Champions League level club or whatever. But I think because I had that, I wasn't ever itching to really get back there necessarily. What I really enjoy working in academy football, Ben, is the reward that you get. And not to say obviously first team isn't rewarding, of course, but to work with individuals where you're trying to enrich their lives and develop them as people as well as football players is incredibly rewarding. And I have been really lucky that there's been players that I've worked with that have gone on to have lots of success, whether that's Premier League success, Champions League success, going to play for the national team, representing their country. But some of my proudest moments are people that, players that you might not necessarily have heard of, that might have just scraped a professional career, but have managed to be there for sort of 10 years and earn a living out of the game. And it might be people that have had some real serious injuries that have threatened to have a career whatsoever, but have managed to come through that adversity and yeah, as I said, earn a living out of the career. So I've got one particular player that always comes to mind that he's already made his debut at Liverpool. He been in and around the national team, had a really, really bad injury that required an, a cartilage replacement, basically. And no one in football had ever had it done before. That operation had only ever occurred in American football. So it was a real kind of pioneering event to be part of. And it really threatened, as I said, whether he was going to have a career or not. And having that knee replacement was probably going to potentially suffer later down the line as an adult. So there was lots of key conversations there around, do you want this? What kind of quality of life is there going to be if this doesn't work, etc. And that was a player that I knew for 7 or 8 years. I knew his family, I knew his sisters, I knew his background, and sort of seen him grow, seen him develop. So to now see him on his 4th professional contract and he's had 250 league appearances is incredibly rewarding. To sit in the stands and watch someone make their debut is incredibly rewarding. And we kind of label success as 3 things. It's having a debut, it's playing at your highest standard possible, so maximizing your potential, and it's career longevity, so playing for as long as possible. The PFA consider the average length of a career to be about 7 years. So I'm pretty sure that incorporates your Ryan Giggses, your Gareth Barrys, who played for 20 plus years, and maybe somebody that might have signed a 1-year professional contract and then played maybe non-league or semi-professional. But to try and get somebody to play for as long as possible, maximizing their potential, and making their debut at the club that they've come through is incredibly rewarding and something that I've been really lucky to be part of on a number of occasions. And I guess that's the bit that drives you to carry on. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm never going to work in first team or have the desire to work in first team. But at the moment, I'm really enjoying working in academy football. I think you probably have a bit more scope to develop. You have maybe a bit more of an opportunity to have a bit more of a say on what goes on. And I kind of really value that, I guess. I've always kind of held first team to be a point where you can probably get sniffed out pretty quickly by players and staff if you're not of the level. And I guess, I don't know whether you want to call it imposter syndrome. I know that's a bit of a cliche at the moment, but I don't know. I've always held that in regard, being like, if I'm going to go back into first team football, I really want to be, as good as I possibly can be. And however long that takes is however long that takes until maybe I feel ready to go back in. But no, I'm more than happy to sort of be in academy football. I don't think it's the stepping stone as it maybe once was seen before. There's plenty of people that have really long academy careers, whether you're a football coach or a performance support practitioner. There's lots of people that I can think of in similar roles to me that have been in football for 15, 20 years that are still in academy football. And I was really lucky, actually, when I went to Leicester, Paul McGuinness joined at the same time. And Paul had been at Manchester United for 20 to 30 years. And the stories that he could tell and the knowledge that he developed through being in such a fantastic development setting for so long, is really infusing and drives you on to carry on being part of an academy, really. So at the moment, Ben, fully enjoying it, and I've got no sort of plans really to leave academy football.
I think that's a great point on the sort of technical side, because we could all probably think of coaches that have been sort of rewarded with players that have had successful careers and been successful in academy football, like Paul, like you mentioned, at Man United and the clubs he's been at. But it's a discussion we've had before around academy coaching. I know you mentioned it before, that not seeing it as that stepping stone and actually seeing it as it's a development role. It's something that coaches should be rewarded for, to be in that position to do all the things that you just mentioned in terms of everything that you enjoy with the job. So I think it's quite refreshing to hear people speak like that. And we've had a lot of people in similar roles to yourself, similar experiences that have said the same thing. So it's really good to hear.
And at the same time, I've got absolutely no judgment at all for anybody that wants to start off in academy football and progress into first team. I completely understand that.
Yeah.
I understand also the financial gap as well, in a lot of positions and a lot of roles. So yeah, completely no judgment on people that have chosen a different path. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it is refreshing to see lots of people to stay in academy football. And I think that's really important to keep certain cultures, certain environments um, alive, really. And yeah, hand it on maybe to the next staff. There's at the youth development conference that the Premier League host every year. Last year was at our place at Leicester. The year before that was Manchester United. And there was a guy there called Professor Alex Hill, and he brought out a book around, I can't remember the title now, the name is escaped me, but it's a fantastic book around basically high performing environments, high performing teams. And it was talking around you need like a set structure of people for a long period of time, and then you get other people that sort of come and go, but that core is really important. So someone like Paul, who was at Manchester United for such a long time, someone like Alex Inglethorpe, who's been at Liverpool for a long, long time, they're the core that really keep things alive, keep things going. They almost call them the grandparents. That's their terminology, not mine. So, and then you have sort of people that are kind of rotating maybe in and out of positions that come in for maybe a 3 to 5 year period. They bring in ideas from outside, push things on a little bit. They then might get replaced by somebody else. But it's really important to have those people there. So at our place at Liverpool, we're really lucky because got John Rudkin, who's been an assistant academy manager, and now the director of football. He's still our academy director as well, so he's a massive advocate for the academy. And we've also got Paul Cheney. So Paul Cheney's also been at the club for 20 plus years. He's our head of coaching. So we've got those real strong pillars that allowed Leicester to be Leicester. If you're with me on that one, and it allows then people to come in with maybe different experiences and push on. I'll have to text you the name of that book, Ben, because it is a great book, and it's got some really good ideas around the longevity of some organisations that have remained successful for, we're talking like 100 years or so. So yeah, great book, Professor Alex Hill, but I can't remember the Centurions, I think it's called. There you go, it's just come to me.
I've just made a note of that. Yeah, I'll definitely be having a look at that. Ollie, I wanted to use this next part of the podcast as a little bit of reflection, but also lessons, because we spoke about the step into leadership and the sort of process of developing as a leader. Just going back a little bit before that, earlier on in your career, are there key either moments or roles that stand out where you feel like you made the most progress as a coach? And what was that?
Yeah, great question. I think going into Coventry was interesting because I didn't play football to a high standard. I was never in an academy or an ex-professional. So I hadn't really seen that professional environment. So going in from a university background, especially sports science, you kind of learn if you do X and add Y to it, you're going to get Z. And it's that very sort of logical process of, I don't know, let's say it's carbohydrate intake. Yeah, players need to take 6 grams per kilogram the day before a game. And they then need to ingest this amount of caffeine. And if you don't, you're never going to perform or whatever it is, or you're never going to optimally perform. So then to go into an environment that is men and actual human beings, and that people might turn around and go, well, actually, I don't want a sugary drink right now. I just want to drink water. It sounds silly almost, but like coming from that university background where you're always thinking around optimizing and pushing things on, it's a bit black and white and theoretical. Actually, just getting into the environment and understanding how to work with human beings, you've got to be a people person. So that was quite a steep learning curve in a way. But what was great going into that environment is I could just watch and observe and learn. So to be around people like Chris Coleman and watch them manage and coach big egos and professional footballers and his coaching staff. Andy Boyle was my boss at the time. He's obviously gone on, had a fantastic career in football. Just to be around those types of people was a really interesting one to be part of, and things that I probably still go back to now in terms of maybe leadership and management and just trying to understand people and having a bit of empathy at times. So that was probably my first bit, was just understanding what is football and how to deal with people, I guess. So that's something that I probably didn't really explicitly think about until maybe later on when I became a leader and started to reflect a bit more. When I went to Liverpool, I I think we were chatting about this before, but it comes to maybe a certain period of time and you're kind of thinking what next in your sort of sports science career and what's going to come after that. And I got to a point as a sports scientist where I wasn't sure if I was going to go into leadership or not. Am I going to just go, become a specialist? And I obviously ended up in this rehab role. I went down the route of a professional doctorate, and that was really to understand. I had some specific ideas around research, around agility and change of direction. But by and large, it was just to try and develop myself and understand processes better, become a level 8 standard thinker, critical thinker, and become a bit more adaptable. I think actually doing that doctoral process not only allowed me to understand research better and to gain some knowledge, create some knowledge that we could apply back into the field, back into football. What it allows you to do, and I know Barry Dress says this, it allows you to see the world differently. Now, when Barry says that, it sounds great. When I say that, it sounds a little bit odd saying around see the world differently. But we'll say kind of look at the world differently, or look at kind of your work life differently. And it's very true. You do, you problem solve differently. You're a lot more self-aware. You understand your own skill set. You ask questions more. And I think because you see things in a slightly different lens, you ask different types of questions. So I actually think that, and I know Barry's mentioned this as well, if you took maybe a professional doctorate or any doctorate away from the academic part, so whether it's a PhD or whatever, and actually designed a program or a course where you learn all those skills, understood the process better, and was able to maybe look at problems in a different way or look at challenges in a different way, I think that should really be the next part of practitioners' development, full stop. And if you look at a lot of the CPD courses you get, whether it's BASIS or UKSCA or NSCA or ISAC or whatever they need to be, they're mostly entry level, kind of like driving license-esque qualifications. I know the BASIS has HPSA afterwards. That's mostly in recognition of where you've already got, as opposed to a development program that you might be part of. So yeah, I think that doctorate training is really, really key and allows you to, as I said, understand yourself in a better way and understand how to solve problems that aren't necessarily your expertise. So jumping forward then into the role that I'm currently at and the role that I was at Celtic, you're leading people that are far more intelligent than you are and know far more than you in certain areas, whether that's psychology, performance analysis, nutrition. So you've got to then try and help and guide these people and lead these people. And it's probably a lot easier for me in sports science because I spent 10 years upskilling myself to be the best sports scientist I could be. So I can go in quite quickly and maybe help push things on and guide and whatever. But then trying to manage people that, you don't have a lot of experience in, that's where those kind of qualities really help. So understanding yourself better, keep saying that, but the self-awareness piece, I think, is central, both the doctoral process and on leadership programs and in yourself, understanding yourself as a leader. So they talk around being an adaptive leader or a situational leader. So Daniel Goleman used to have leadership types. There was a coercive leader and there was a coachable leader. I can't remember all the different types and styles, but people kind of, well, that's me and that's who you are. And yeah, that's great. And I think that was really informative. But I think things have moved on a little bit. And I think we recognize actually that they're almost like a set of golf clubs and we just use different ones at different times with different people in different situations. Like you might need to coach people more in some situations and you might need to role model and lead people by example in others. So understanding who you are a bit more and being an authentic leader allows you to be more of a situational leader and an adaptive leader. So I think those doctoral processes and those doctoral training bits really helped me to become a better leader. As an overall package then, in terms of more of a strategy, every academy is going to have an academy performance plan, which really just shows what you're going to be working on for the next sort of 3 to 5 years, what the focus is. Most people use like a VMOST kind of style. Every department then needs to dial into that academy performance plan and really show how they support and contribute to that. How we've designed to go, or how we've set up in performance support, how we aid that process, or how we support the academy performance plan is through KPIs, right? Which I'm sure lots of people do. But then coming up with those KPIs is all question based. What are we working back from? What are we trying to really achieve here as a team of performance analysts or a team of psychologists? I've gone a roundabout way of saying this, Ben, but I think seeing the problems or challenges differently through that doctoral process allowed me then to help come up with what are we trying to answer and why for different disciplines that I don't have lots of experience in. So my prof that I had a lot of performance analysis in, but I wouldn't consider myself a performance analyst, for example. You know, my degree had lots of nutrition in, but I wouldn't class myself as a nutritionist. So yeah, so I think having that process really helped me to be a better leader, and then having the ability, or trying to have the ability, to bring it all together and align it as one department, as effectively a team of teams. Yeah, it was just all massively helped through that sort of doctoral process, really. And then I guess outside of that, just specific individual parts, as we mentioned, around having those people at football clubs for a long period of time, learning from those as leaders has been really, really important. Keeping in contact with them. So Celtic have got some people that have been there for a long, long period of time. That was really beneficial for me to understand how to lead for a long time. I think it's quite easy to lead for a short period of time, maybe a couple of seasons or a couple of years. You can be put to the floor a little bit. But if you're looking to set up something for the long term, if you're looking to really have a bit of a legacy and put something in place for a long period of time, I think you need to be a lot more patient. So I learned a lot about being patient, and it does take a long time to set up a high performing team or high performing processes. So to summarize, mate, I'd say early on it was just understanding the people process and what football's like. I guess the middle part was that sort of doctoral experience and really pushing on. I guess that last part is just having some patience and learning that, leading for a long time, it looks different from leading for a short period of time, and being a bit more empathy based and empathy led with people, I think goes a long, long way, right?
Definitely. No, that's a top breakdown. I wanted to move into current day, and I know you've talked about obviously leadership, and it's something that you'll continue to upskill on, I'm sure, and pick up different experiences as you go as well. What's your style, your process of learning now? Because you've talked about the doctorate, you talked about the MRes, obviously degree, picked up the experiences over a number of years, different clubs, positions. What about current day now? What sort of process are you going through in terms of upskilling?
I was really lucky, Ben, to be part of a leadership program that the Premier League put on, and that in itself was a really good program. But the things it's taught me, I think, carries on now in terms of the learning process. So I'll touch on both. So the Academy Leadership Program is a program that's led by as I said, the Premier League, that looks to upskill people that are in leadership positions that aren't academy managers, because there's an academy management program, there's a head of coaching program, but then there was lots of people in leadership positions that weren't catered for. So whether that's head of performance, heads of education, assistant academy managers, heads of operations, and things like that. And in and itself was a fantastic program, and it was great. The people that you met on there was great, but it was quite loose in some regards in terms of the curriculum. So what I mean by that is, if you go and do a degree, they will say, right, module 1, boom, 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 this is what you learn, and this is exactly what you're going to know by the end of it in terms of learning outcomes. The Academy Leaders Program was more around, what do you want to get out of it? Which I really struggled with at the start. I was like, well, I just want to be a better leader. That's all I want to be. So, you tell me, you're the experts. Like, I'm happy for you to tell me where I need to look. But well, no, you need to be a bit more self-reflective, be a bit more critical on knowing who you are, where you want to be, why people should be led by you. And you put this program around yourself, really. And they'd support that with a mentor. They'd support that with a peer learning group. So it was a very different structured program that I'd experienced before, just going through a typical higher education program. And once you get the hang of it, once you get your head around it, I think it really changes how you learn and what you want to learn afterwards. So I started that program a couple of years ago, and it finished last year. And since then, it's kind of working on, well, where are the gaps in me as a leader? What do I need to do? How do I need to behave? What do I need to know? How am I going to get there? Who's going to support me through that process? And I think once you get your head around that, I think you just work backwards. I know it's a bit of a logical process. It's call it reverse engineering if you really want to, but it is exactly that. It's working out kind of where you want to be, what the holes are, and then working out how you're going to do it, as opposed to maybe going, right, well, I need to go on this program because everybody else is doing it. And I'm going to come out with this piece of paper at the end of it saying that I am at this level. I think you're in a much better position to be able to go through something and get some advice, whether it's a mentor or a coach or someone that you're working with, give you some feedback, whatever it needs to be. Maybe it's a 360, whatever it is, that you can then, set up your own program. And that's what I've done. So post that, I'm just coming to the end of my doctorate, which will be great once I finally hand it in. But I was kind of looking at like, what's next? And a lot of people are going down the Masters of Sports Directorship. And I'm not saying I'm never going to do that, right? But that looks to be like the next qualification that a lot of leaders are getting. So I looked at it and it does look great. And I think there's loads to it. And I think a lot of people are on there you can learn a lot from. But I was like, that might come later down the line. So I've gone down more of a mentoring and coaching route. So I'm going to source out, a mentor and a coach that can help. That will come and watch me deliver in whatever capacity that is, whether that's practically deliver, whether that's one-to-ones with staff, whether that's presentations, meetings, difficult conversations, making decisions, whatever it is, and then help to develop me in those areas that I might be struggling or needing more help in. And I think then that guides your reading, that guides your the materials that you find, your resources that you find. I just think you're a lot more directed in that approach. So that's kind of where I'm aiming to go down, really. And I think I've had a lot more success going down that route, as opposed to maybe just jumping on a generic program. And it's been really, really beneficial. And I think hopefully, it's working, and I feel like it's helping to develop me as a leader. But then I think that ties into what leadership is, right? Like that piece around being an authentic leader. You have to be who you are. I'm not going to try and be somebody else. But what's my starting point? Well, if you look at different psychometric tests, we do one called Spotlights at Leicester, which is great. So I'm down as logically prudent. That's my start point. So I like things to be logical. So I like to therefore work with people that are maybe a bit more logical, flow charts, diagrams, presentations. So if someone's more of a talker than they are maybe a drawer when they're explaining things, I find that a little bit more difficult. But I just need to know that if I'm going to come in contact with that person, I just need to be a bit more adaptable to them. And then the prudent part, I guess that's working in football for a long time, trying to keep people fit and available, but and trying to mitigate risks. But again, it's like, well, what's out of my comfort zone? Okay, well, we ask questions like, well, what's the worst that can happen? Let's just make a decision. Perhaps it's like progress that we're after, not perfection. Let's just move things forward and reassess after that. So I think, a lot of that is just wrapped around understanding you better, how you manage and lead yourself, how you then manage and lead other people is like the next layer around that, like a dartboard, if you like. And then the final layer around that is then how do you lead the department? How do you lead the organization? How do you help to lead the academy? It's all wrapped up in that sort of first part, really. And I kind of then, look to learn outside of that and direct it that way.
That approach using the coach and mentor, though, it really, like you've just said, it really personalizes that journey then, doesn't it? Because they're probably going to flag up things where they go, actually, Ollie, if we just focus on this, and there's a few different approaches we could take with this, and this is an area that you probably could do with reading around more. It gives you that focus, doesn't it? Rather than just saying, like you said before, you've got to become a better coach, you've got to become a better leader. And it's like, well, what's my step to that? What am I missing at the minute? So I think, and you said it as well, staying authentic to yourself. That's where you create your own style, isn't it? You become your own type of coach and leader.
So I think, the mentorship programs are great. And I think that where we are as an industry is moved forward from when I started off in the industry, and we're in a much better place for it. I think there's mentorship schemes out there that don't just cater for maybe people in sort of my position and leadership position. It can be at any point in your career. So you've got like James Malone's mentorship scheme, you've got Shane Murphy's mentorship scheme. Pretty sure Grant Downey has a mentorship scheme too. I think it's just a lot more of an effective and efficient process to learn, and they can really cut to like what you need to know, and you can ask the questions that you need to ask as opposed to maybe just going on to um, going on to a generic program. And we don't all learn through producing essays, do we? And pieces of coursework or tests. Actually, a lot of our learning is learning from experience and learning from other people with more experience than what we have. Excuse me. So to have those experiences and those mentorships of people like we just mentioned that have got and had fantastic careers and worked with some unbelievable people and players. Yeah, what a fantastic position to be in. So I definitely recommend for anybody to go down that route. And I do like to read books, Ben. So apologies if I keep talking about books, but there is a really good book around mentorships. It's called Being the Super Mentor, and it just talks around very very quickly talks around what mentorship is and what it isn't. And super mentors are people that open doors and opportunities for you. I think that's very true. So if you can get the right type of mentor, they can go, oh, actually, I know Ben Cartwright, that'd be a great person for you to chat to on that. And let me just introduce you over email and then you can pick up there. Or, oh, yeah, that's no problem. I know somebody at that club. I can, if you want to have a chat with them and maybe go there and experience that. That's what the best mentors do. And then it's just like learning on top of learning. It's like that compound effect. And I think that just far outweighs anything that you can maybe gain outside of or gain within, set programs and agendas in some degrees and qualifications. I think a lot now are really pushing down that peer learning group when you are enrolling on things, because learning from other people is really key, isn't it? So yeah, that's what I definitely recommend for sure. And if you are down that sort of more direct route, try and learn from the people that you're learning with, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And there's obviously the introductions, but there's also the fact that the names you've mentioned there, luckily they've all been on the podcast, which is a good sign. But they've also had a lot of experiences, like you said about before, about failing fast and having these experiences and learning from them. There's probably not too much between the three guys you've mentioned there that they've not seen within football. So when you're taking questions, like queries about certain things that are happening, they've probably had something, not that they're going to give you the perfect answer and perfect resolution all the time, but they'll have a very good conversation with you about it, isn't it? And that's the benefit as well of having someone like that.
100%, Ben. I think, I think trying to learn from other people and their experiences, like you just said, maybe their mistakes is really beneficial. We've recruited a lot at Leicester over the last 2.5 years for different reasons. And I've certainly noticed the difference between the people that have mentors and coaches and the ones that don't. I think they're a lot more candid. They're just a lot more, I keep saying self-aware, but I think it is really, really important. But I think they know where their strengths and weaknesses truly are. And I think they stand head and shoulders above people that aren't on those programs and mentorship. So yeah, I certainly recommend it for anybody that's maybe looking for the next role or looking to transition. I'd certainly reach out to these types of people and try and learn from them as much as possibly can.
It's great advice, and obviously someone coming from someone in your position as well that is looking out for talent in terms of coaches, and it's key advice from someone like yourself. So Ollie, that's been very informative, and I think we've covered quite a bit there, so I really appreciate you coming back on. I'm sure there's going to be probably questions around different areas that we've covered, or people that just want to just stay in touch with what you've got going on. Where would you direct people to go?
Either LinkedIn or Twitter. I think Twitter is maybe not what it was in the past, perhaps for knowledge exchange. I think LinkedIn's probably stepped in its place a little bit, but either or. I think my handle on Twitter is Oliver John M. I think it is, and I'm sure if you search me through LinkedIn as Oliver Morgan Leicester, I think that will come up. So yeah, by all means, please get in contact, and if anybody wants to chat around anything around transitioning from being a practitioner to a leader or the benefits of a doctoral program, please by all means get in touch.
Last question, mate. This is just a personal interest. What's your current read at the minute?
My current read. I've just started the new Michael Lewis book.
Okay.
I think it's called Going Infinite. I think it is. I try and alternate as much as I can and try and maybe read a novel and then maybe something that they used to be called self-help books, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think that terminology dies. It got cancelled. And Michael Lewis is probably kind of somewhere in between. He tells stories. He's a bit like Michael Gladwell, I guess, in terms of that domain, or David Epstein. That kind of those authors in that middle where you kind of learn off, maybe cautionary tales or whatever. But it's I recommend anybody to read the Michael Lewis books. He's wrote some great ones on Moneyball and Blindside, I think it was called. But no, it's really interesting. It's actually about cryptocurrency and the story around a guy that's gone from zero to everything, really. So yeah, no, I've only just started it, but it is a bit of a page turner. So I definitely recommend it.
I like getting a good book recommendation. I made a few notes there so I can fill the next few months. So I appreciate that, mate. Ollie, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Ben. Good to chat. Thanks very much.